Okay, we're recording.
Hey, this is Team 4, and I am Kathy Miller. We're going to be discussing chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13. We'll start in chapter 10. I particularly found, in chapter 10, the networking information interesting. I'm looking at the little diagram on page 257, and it shows Gregory has they refer to it as a click network, which is kind of a narrow focused network where Berta on the other side has looks like a pretty extensive network going there. So they did a little bit of comparing between the two, and
yeah, sorry to interrupt, Catherine. This is Doug, and yeah, I thought it was interesting too. I just think when I'm looking at Gregory's case, it's just kind of really common in a lot of workplaces. People tend to want to stick to their inner circle versus almost kind of branch out into other areas. And I almost kind of feel like it's just different job formats. Like, for example, I worked at a call center, and it was almost like the mentality was quite different and led towards click mentality because the job function, was, you started off not the, most extensive, and you're kind of just in your own little bubble, versus like my current job, you have to network and work with other people in the company regardless of department, because that's how you're going to, move in upward in the company. Anything else on that section, or anything else about chapter 10? You guys can still hear me, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure I don't lose you. Go ahead.
Page 255. I like the communication paragraph because it said in an ideal organization environment, there's clear and consistent communication. And then it says the reality of organizational communication is far from the ideal. So it said that, most organizations are composed of formal communication, which is incomplete. So it's just your imaginary and then your reality of how communication is.
And yet it's so important to communicate effectively. But yeah, I can see that.
Anything else on this chapter?
There was so much.
Yeah, it was a good chapter for sure. I feel like it's definitely more of a relevant chapter. You feel like you can use in every, the everyday work environment versus just theory.
Well, I did like kind of how they broke down this is Terry Nave on when they were kind of breaking up the different roles that are played within a team. I don't think you really realize that you come in and then you're automatically either a boundary or a buffer or a goalkeeper. So I kind of liked how it broke down the different roles that people play within your team unit.
Mm.
Yeah, that was interesting. That was at the end of the chapter, wasn't it?
Yeah. You really do. It's almost like the way that you go into a team setting is kind of the way you are in life. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
Anything else on that chapter?
All right, let's move on to chapter 11 then. Chapter 11 was leadership. Talks a little bit about leadership styles. Wait a second, I had marked a page. Let's try to find it. Oh, on page, I like the figures. They work better for me. Because they throw all the information on one page and I can see and compare. I think that's why it worked for me. On page 302, it talks about key guidelines for successful delegation. And I like set goals and be specific. I always appreciate when somebody's going to tell me specifics about what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. It helps me to adjust and be better. So,
Yeah, I agree.
It's hard to know what my standard is if I don't know how high to strive for.
No, I definitely agree there. And one of the other things I really liked about this chapter, they went over a lot of the leadership styles, and I feel like I'm in the organizational leadership program, and I feel like every class pretty much covered that subject. But I did like that this book went to a little bit more detail, and really the whole thing about that. Even though there's different leadership styles and different characteristics within each style, really effective leaders should be using all of them in varying situations and being versatile than just saying I'm the servant leader or I practice transformational style. So I thought that section was really probably one of the better ones in the whole program that's talked about this subject.
Yeah, that's true, and I kind of agree with you, Doug, in that you kind of need to use a combination of all of them because each individual is different and they're going to respond differently to a different style. So, some people find motivation in different ways. And some people you can't yell at because they'll shy away, and then some people are motivated by where if you bring something to their attention and it'll motivate them to do better.
I agree. Anything else from chapter 11?
I have 290. What teams expect for leaders. I thought that was very beneficial. I've been a manager. Excuse me. I'm currently trying to go back into leadership, and it was just an interesting chapter to go over. There's a lot of politics, and sometimes your manager doesn't always make you aware of what they're expecting. So I just thought it was a very interesting chapter.
Yeah, I agree on that. I do wish they kind of went further into that part though, or kind of see like a poll about what they would like to see in leaders, I thought that would have been a cool add-on to that.
Yeah. What makes an effective leader?
Right. Or what qualities do they like, in leaders?
Yeah.
Aaron, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay.
Okay. I was about ready to feel bad for your computer. I mean, oh my goodness. Okay. Any other parts on chapter 11? All right, so let's move on to 12.
I think it's 12. 12, limited relations.
There was this part on here, I'm trying to find it, that I thought was really interesting about this chapter.
There's a lot in this chapter. It has conflict and relations, inter-team relations, relationships.
Yeah, I'm trying to find it right now.
What I liked was on 326 where it says shared goal, like groups that focus on super whatever goals, those that represent the greater good. And I think like we all have like the same goal to, do our task and get our flags and get a good grade.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I really like that one.
Yeah. What was it? This really bothered me. It was like something really specific in this chapter.
Well, while you're looking for it, I'll talk a little bit about, let's see if I can find the page that it's on. Oh, the post-merger behavior. Okay, 315, and I guess the reason why this stood out to me is because I was with a company that was bought by, it was actually bought by a Canadian company, and as I was reading through this little section here, I was remembering how, when the company bought us, they laid off all the would be the production people, and we were left with all the office staff was left, and they started moving people around and finding groups, and yeah. So when I was reading through that, I was just relating what I experienced and what I saw other people experiencing, and it did have an effect on our behavior and a lot of confusion and miscommunication. A cutthroat activity, actually.
Oh, actually, you perfectly led into that. Thank you, Catherine. I found it. Right before we talked about team rivalry. And I just thought it was interesting about the effect of competition on rivalry. It talked about how the degree of competition depends on how close they are in terms of competitiveness on their key dimensions. So if they're more competitive, you may not maximize your overall company. They may not be less willing to maximize overall company gains. And so I was just reading that section and just kind of made me think through about, a lot of companies, depending on what kind of industry you're in, you kind of have teams within teams that are competing against each other. But that intense competition could ultimately lead to hurting the company overall if it goes too far. I just thought it was a really interesting part. Because that's certainly something I would not have thought of, because I'm a pretty competitive guy in business. So I would not have thought about the overall, could there be an overall negative impact if it's set up to be too competitive and it hurts the whole and only benefits the smaller team. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Well, it creates kind of it segregates. Even though you're all kind of going for the same goal in a sense. But I think it has to do with the manager and how your manager is pushing you. If you don't have if you have a manager that looks at the group or the team, regardless of your team or their team, then I think it creates a cohesiveness. But if you have a manager that is all about their team, then I think that's where the hostile environment comes from.
Yeah, that will definitely play a big role in that.
Well, because I went to we had like this office, I don't know, fall get together, and I mentioned to the next day, I mentioned to my manager, I'm like, that was kind of a weird gathering of people, just because literally teams were just with their teams, even though it was a department, event. Everyone was just in their little groups because they weren't trying to enforce the engagement or the team setting or the team environment. And I think that has to do with how we're focused on our individual goals. We don't really go outside of that. And so that's why it made that event very awkward.
Yeah.
It was weird.
Well, I would agree that being a part of a team sometimes goes against, or at least going like outside of your group goes against your natural inclinations. So sort of have to, people, it was sort of like Doug was talking about, sort of training, learning earlier. I think that's a skill that definitely needs to be learned.
Yeah.
Sort of going outside your comfort zone.
Right.
Same thing.
And going outside of your group.
No, I definitely agree. Anything else on chapter 12, guys?
I won't go into a lot of detail, but I have to say that the part about stereotyping made me take a good hard look at myself. We all like to think we don't stereotype, but yeah, I had to take a good hard look at myself and kind of admit that, yeah, that does happen. I do that.
Well, I think we all do that.
Yeah.
I think it's such a natural tendency, whether we, like it or not. I think our brains, through a combination of things, tend to be more wired to do that, and I think that's why that section is also good about just kind of teaching us to, when we potentially run across that situation, to catch yourself like you did, and just kind of double check anything before you continue down that rationalization.
before it gets out of control. Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
And well, and I, there's always, I think stereotyping is probably an unhealthy or something that can be good, because I think, like Doug said, grouping people, grouping things, I think is in your mind is a natural, normal thing that we do. It's just when we group people into things and we make things up that don't exist is where problems lie. But I think, we're kind of naturally inclined, big, little, we want to put things into groupings. And I think that's sort of a natural thing, which is why we groups and, are inclined, towards people with certain types of personalities, things like that. Those aren't necessarily bad things, but I think this is talking about when it moves into unhealthy territory.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on that section? All right, let's move to chapter 13. Talk about teaming across distance and culture. The one thing out of this whole chapter I thought was really interesting was, I don't know if you guys had read the comments that Professor Knighting gave our second progress video when we talked about forming, storming, norming, performing.
Right.
I was like, when he said that, I was like, we didn't cover that in our chapters. What does that mean? But it's perfectly there is what we were doing already in the group, and that's on page 347. And it's one of those just kind of nice box pieces of information Catherine loves. But I just thought it was cool that we were already naturally doing that, and we didn't even think about have to read through it.
Well, what I thought of when I read that comment was because I had learned about this forming, storming, norming, and performing in a different class. Actually, it was in one of my military classes. And when I read that, it struck me because we only have, what do we have, like 6 weeks? Or 5 weeks, actually. And to go through these 4 different stages, which normally takes months for a team, at least based on what they taught us in the military, it takes months. So I kind of just chuckled to myself. We didn't really have a choice but to go through that right away because we were together for just such a short period of time.
Right. I also do like the strategy to talk about when it comes to managing distance in virtual teams. So I thought that was a good section. Although I feel like, even though a lot of it was kind of just like, yeah, you would expect that, was
Right.
one of them. It was still cool to just read through.
Right. I wondered though when I read that section about in that section it talked about initial face-to-face experience, and I wondered how practical that is for most companies, that are spread out or doing business with people overseas.
I would think that's more practical than we would think, because I feel like and a lot of companies are structured that way. There are maybe quarterly times where they'll meet together in person. So I wonder if that would probably be more, like I was just reading that Yahoo is actually getting away from virtual distant working.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because they actually found that, I was reading that they found that it was counterproductive in terms of collaboration
Oh.
and innovating. But they were saying in the article that they were still meeting in person. It just wasn't as frequent, compared to the traditional setup.
Oh, okay.
For me, just through experience, I think, always meeting face to face is, I think you always come to a better understanding when people are looking each other in the eye. And then, talking over the phone or via Skype or whatever is always, to me, the second best. Written is always third. I mean, I could see where, if you're only doing virtual communication, that after a while things can get lost in translation, especially if you're doing a lot of written translation, because you lose a lot of tone. Oftentimes, it takes a lot longer, just the practical end. It takes a lot longer to type out something than it does to just say it. So people get impatient, don't talk things through quite as well. I mean, nobody wants to send 20 emails back and forth to each other. So I think it doesn't surprise me that Yahoo's going back to meeting face to face more.
Yeah.
Well, plus too, if you have to send 20 emails in a conversation, that's just the wrong medium you chose, to begin with. But I do agree with you. I mean, it's just I was reading that article. There's part of me. I'm like, I think the concept works. I think the concept can work for very specific people. Like for me, I couldn't do it. I need a person interaction. I need to go in the office. Otherwise, I feel like I'll just become a hermit and drive my wife crazy. So, but I do agree with you. I mean, it's just it's good to have just that in-person relationship. Or if you're through communication, it just doesn't seem to work. Just say, hey, you know what? Hop on Skype, or let's just do a phone call real quick and talk this out.
Yeah, you absolutely have to.
Oh, I think your book might be close to your microphone. I'm not sure if that's feedback or something.
My book's on the opposite side, but this actually is a pretty powerful app, so I'll stop doing what I'm doing.
Okay. I just thought
Good job, app developer. That's pretty good. Anything else?
That's it.
I got a page mark for that. Oh, the virtual meeting checklist. It's on page 350. Actually, what I saw was on page 351 was agree on actions and next steps. I always appreciate that, even in a face-to-face meeting, is when as you're closing the meeting, that whoever's closing the meeting, it brings up, okay, these are the things that are coming up in the next few months, or things that we need to talk about at the next meeting. I always appreciate those things because it's nice to know what's coming ahead, so you can kind of look forward to that and have something prepared for it. And I guess it gets the wheels turning in my head. I guess is the best way to say that.
Yeah.
I agree.
All right, shall we wrap it up?
All right, let me stop it right now.